It was a hot day. It was probably midday. Sun beating down on the deserts around Midian. And there's a well, and there's a whole lot of shepherds around the well. And there's 7 beautiful women that come to try and water their sheep. And they just can't get next to the well because of these layabouts, these difficult men that had dominated the well. So the women couldn't get to water their father's sheep. And so here comes Moses. And I guess in the sight of all these beautiful women, he gets this amazing strength. And he manages to chase them all away so that these 7 beautiful women can water their sheep. And so we are told in the book of Exodus in chapter 2 and verse 16, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill their troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, well, how's it that you returned so early today? And they answered, well, beautiful man, this Egyptian, he came and rescued us from the shepherds, and now we managed to water our sheep and our flock, and everything was good. So here's the priest in Midian, Reuel, also known as Jethro, by the way. He thinks of 7 daughters, 1 lowly man, strong, probably rich. Go and fetch him. Don't leave him, go and fetch him. And so Reuel asked his daughters, why did you leave him there? Invite him to come and have something to eat. Jethro's obviously got plans for one of his girls anyways. And so you see that in verse 21 that Moses agrees to stay with the man who gave his daughter Tsiphora to Moses in marriage. And so right in the beginning, obviously no birth control in those days, she produces a son, and she calls him Gershom because he said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. A beautiful story, a beautiful start to a love story. And so we see that Moses' life is divided into 3 groups of 40 years. He's at 120 years when he dies. And the first 40 years he's in Egypt. Part of the royalty, he's part of the ruling class there. And he's been on the run because he went and murdered an Egyptian. And he's been on the run now, and he's gone right across the whole of Sinai, and he's in Midian, right on the other side. And this is where he remains for the next 40 years. And so he has 2 sons, and I guess both those boys are born at the beginning of the marriage. And so he's there for 40 years, and at the end of that second 40-year period, God says to him, you need to go back to Egypt. You need to go and let my people go. You need to go and free them. And so Moses gets together with Tsiphora and the 2 boys, and off they go. And they're on their way back to Egypt. Happy marriage, everything's good. But now we come to this really strange encounter in Exodus 4. Because as Moses is traveling along Sinai, through the deserts of Sinai, on his way back to Egypt, we see here in Exodus 4 in verse 24, there was a lodging place where they were just camping for the night. And the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. And verse 25 tells us that Tsiphora took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. And so the Lord let him alone. And at that time she said, a bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. So many people have got many ideas, and all the rabbis have got their ideas on what's happening here, but reading between the lines, it seems that Moses is going to free his people. All those people are circumcised. The two boys are probably 38 and 36 years old, somewhere around there, and he hasn't circumcised them. And how can he, Moses, himself being circumcised, Aaron himself being circumcised, go and free all those that are circumcised, and his boys are not circumcised? And obviously Tsiphora knew about this. I mean, she'd lived with him for 40 years. She knew about the importance of circumcision. And so she saves the day. She's the savior here. She's an incredible lady. And I mean, you need to try and imagine that. You need to try and put yourself in that kind of place. It's nighttime, it's dark. They're at a lodging place. Well, maybe it's evening. We don't know. We're not exactly told the time period yet, but it takes a flintstone. And I mean, these two boys, as I say, they're probably 38, 36, around about that age. And she circumcises them. Now, I mean, I've watched a couple of Jewish circumcisions in my day. And they've got like a little safety thing. I mean, there's a little penis that's sticking out like that out of the... Because they take the little boy and they wrap him up in like a little mummy, actually, and the little winky's sticking out the top there. And the rabbi, even if you've got thick glasses, which is quite often the case because a lot of those rabbis don't have great eyes, and you've got a little clamp that he puts over the top like that, and then he takes the little foreskin off the top. And that's all very clean and very nice. But imagine trying to do that to a boy of 38 years old, and you're in the middle of a desert, and with a flint stone. Well, that's not a pretty picture. But I think the important part here is that it's Tsiphora that saves Moses' life, because God was going to slay him here. And so, we're told in verse 27 that the Lord then says to Aaron, go into the wilderness and meet Moses. So he met Moses at the mountain of God and he kissed him. Then Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say, and also all the signs that he had commanded him to perform. And so it seems at this point that Tsiphora and the two boys go back to Daddy, back in Midian. And Moses and Aaron then go into Egypt, back to Egypt. And we have all the 10 plagues that roll out from there. So pretty gruesome stuff. And then after the 10 plagues, you'll remember the last plague, the killing of the firstborn, and the Passover, which is what we're celebrating right now, Passover. They leave. And on the way back, they come to the mountain of God again. And there's a different scene that we come to now. When Jethro and the two boys come with Tsiphora, and they meet Moses. Exodus 18 is the reference here. And it's really interesting because Jethro is looking at this lot and thinking, well, there's no possible way that Tsiphora and the two boys are going to become a family unit while Moses is trying to control well over 3 million people. And Moses is taking, the big complaints, the middle complaints, and the small complaints all to himself. And Jethro, being the priest in Midian, he says to Moses, well, I'm going to give you a lesson in management, because you're never, ever going to get together with my daughter and my 2 grandsons and make a family unit if you carry on like this. So you need to take a management lesson from me. Set over Israel captains over thousands, captains over hundreds, captains over tens. And, that's the way you can manage. You need to have a structure here. And so Moses takes Jethro's advice, and he does that. He sets up a good management system, captains over thousands, captains over hundreds, captains over tens. And all of a sudden, that changes Moses' life. And he's back to being a father. And he's back to being a good husband with Tsiphora. So we see that up till this point in time, Miriam Moses' sister, she's the queen bee. She's the lady who rules the roost. She's the one that's, in a sense, the backbone of the whole society. She's the matriarch. She's the queen bee. And obviously once Tsiphora comes back online and that marriage starts functioning properly. Remember that God is a God of families. He's a father, God the Father. He's the God that saved Noah and his family, Rahab and her family. So as far as our God is concerned, it's focus on the family. And that's exactly what's happened here. It's focus on the family. And so Moses and his family are a unit again. And Miriam is absolutely livid, completely livid. And she goes to Aaron and said, listen, we've got to do something about this. We can't let this carry on. This black woman, this Midianite, black as the tents of Midian, no way. We've got to sort her out. And so we come to Numbers chapter 12, where we find this record, which is very interesting. And so we see here that Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of this Cushite wife. This is not a different wife. A lot of people think, oh, it's a different wife. No, it's not a different wife. She's a Cushite. She's as black as the tents of Midian. She's a black lady, is Tsiphora. And the word Tsiphora, by the way, means sparrow. She's a little hardy little lady. She's really a tough cookie, as we would say in the English language. And so Moses, they come to Moses, Aaron and Miriam come to Moses because of this Cushite wife. For he had married a Cushite, we're told. So the word Cushite is twice there in the text, you'll notice, in Numbers 12 and in verse 1. And then verse 2, they say, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? They asked. Has he not also spoken through us? Yeah. Well, they're in for a surprise. And the Lord heard this, we're told. A very interesting verse here in verse 3. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the whole earth. I mean, that's a beautiful testimony of Moses, a humble man. And later on we're going to find the most humble man, which is Jesus. So there's this beautiful parallel now between Moses and Jesus, and that is humility. To this man will I look, who he is of a humble heart and a contrite spirit, and trembles at my word. This is Moses. And this is the Jesus that we meet later in the New Testament. And so verse 4, at once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out to the tent of meeting, all three of you. So the three of them went out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance to the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. And when the two of them stepped forward, he said, listen to my words. It's a bit of a pity that Miriam's going to take the brunt here, and not Aaron as well, because obviously they're both complicit in what they're doing here. But I think it's much more Miriam. She's the guilty party. She's the one that's really stirred the pot here. And so God says to them, when there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to him in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And so the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. I don't know what happened to Aaron here, but certainly what happens to Miriam is not great. And so verse 10 tells us, when the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous and became as white as snow. Notice the contrast here. Tsiphora, as black as the tents of Midian, this Cushite, and look at her arm now. Her skin was as leprous and became as white as snow. And Aaron turned towards her and saw that she had defiling skin disease. And so he says to Moses, please, my Lord, I ask you, do not hold this against us and our sin. We have done so foolishly. Do not let her be as a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb, with its flesh half eaten away. And here comes the humility of Moses after this challenge from his own sister, from his own family. Had planned an insurrection against him. So Moses cried to the Lord, please God, heal her. And so the Lord replies to Moses, if her father had spit in her face, which should not have been a disgrace for 7 days, confine her to the outside of the camp for 7 days, and then she can be brought back. So Miriam is put out of the camp. She's got time to think about it. 7 days in isolation to think about it. And she does. And so we're told in verse 15 that Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days. And the people did not move on until she was brought back, which is also interesting. You've got well over 3 million people that are parked off now for 7 days, not moving. And it's all because of Miriam. But there's the mercy and love of God. That the whole nation was basically put on hold for Miriam to bring her back into fellowship, back into the community. But this time she comes back and she's a different woman, because she needs to know that the God of Israel is the God of families. And it's a husband, and it's a wife, and it's the children. In fact, if we look at the law, most of the law in the Old Testament is there to protect the family unit. Whether it was health laws, whether it was marriage laws, whether it was sex laws, whatever the laws are, they're there to protect the family. And so the record ends with verse 16. And after that, the people left Hazeroth and encamped in the desert of Paran. And so what a beautiful story, a beautiful love story that starts at a well and carries on right through the next 38 years, I guess. Because it's only at the end of that next 38 years that Moses dies. We don't have a record of Zipporah's death, but she probably does die on the way, because it's only Joshua and Caleb that enter the promised land. And Tsiphora is not there. But she'll be there in the kingdom with Moses and with her 2 boys. Thanks for listening, and God bless.